New polls out on the COVID relief bill. This one here is from Data for Progress. New poll, voters overwhelmingly support another round of $1,200 coronavirus relief checks. So it's 88% support. Jesus Christ. That's amazing. 9% oppose. I guess we found the hardcore libertarians, the anarcho-capitalists. And 2% don't know. 85% of voters also want Congress to pass a coronavirus relief bill before the end of the year. Now, they have reached a deal on that. For more information on it, check out the actual segment where I go through the specific provisions. Shout out to Jeff Stein for always putting this stuff out there in the most digestible way possible. But isn't that something? Basically, 9 out of 10, 90% of the American people are like, yeah, we need another $1,200. Of course. And listen, I think there's a really important point embedded in this, which is politics that materially improves people's lives wins and is incredibly popular. So it's almost like, to the extent that there's silver bullet, a magic formula in politics, it's this. Actually fight for people. Actually try to improve their lives. And then you'll be rewarded. 90%. I mean, we have COVID-19, at least 315,000 Americans dead. The economic implosion as a result of that. The food bank lines are insanely long, longest I've ever seen in my lifetime for sure. We have about 60% of small businesses going to close permanently. There's incredible hurt out there. And guys, you have to think about it like this. We're doing nothing except for asking our own money back. Right? Like, we pay taxes. Unfortunately, those taxes oftentimes go to Wall Street bailouts. Those taxes go to the military-industrial complex. They go to fund things that you and I wouldn't agree are good things. In fact, they're terrible things. But when we say, hey, give us another stimulus check in a giant economic downturn with a pandemic, really what we're saying effectively is just give us our own money back. We paid taxes. Now it's time for the government to be there for us in our time of need. That's not too much to ask for, which is why only 9% of people oppose it. Only 9% of people oppose it. That says something, doesn't it? So then let me show you this too, because this is also interesting. What's the most important issue? Healthcare, 27%. Jobs in the economy, 24%. Civil rights and civil liberties, 10%. Climate change, 10%. And then everything else you could see single digits down there if you go down the line. But look at that, man. So in other words, again, I hate to say I told you so, except I don't. I love to say it right now. I want to bathe in this I told you so, and I'm going to do that. The most important issue, healthcare. We're always screaming that that's the most important issue. Always. Medicare for all. Every single Medicare for all supporter won re-election, even Medicare for all supporters in Republican plus 6 districts. That's Katie Porter. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? Healthcare is the most important, 27%. And then right behind it, jobs in the economy. And what are we always talking about on this show? Medicare for all, living wage. I told you guys that the new thing that hopped the list of most important policies in my eyes, UBI this year. UBI this year became one of my top policies because when you look at a situation like we have right now with a pandemic and a depression, what's the most effective, efficient, direct way to help people? Cut them a check. Cut them a check. So you want to call it universal basic income? Call it universal basic income. You want to call it Social Security for all? In the same way we have Medicare for all, Social Security for all? Yeah. Call it that too. We'll call it whatever you want to call it. Giving checks to people on a monthly basis as a bare minimum, like, hey, you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to eat. You're going to be able to have a roof over your head. I think that's awesome. I think that's the best thing you could possibly do. And clearly, the voters agree. Again, this isn't rocket science. 9 out of 10 people, we need more stimulus checks. 27% of people, healthcare is the number one issue. By the way, that's also because 15 million Americans lost their healthcare since the beginning of COVID. So we have a healthcare system. 315,000 people dead from COVID. Millions of people have had COVID. Medical bills is one of the top causes of bankruptcy. Pre-COVID, you had 45,000 people die every year because they don't have health care. you had tens of millions of people without health insurance. Of course, healthcare is going to be the number one issue. Of course, we pay more than the rest of the world and we don't even have everybody covered. And our outcomes are worse. I'm telling you, man, it's time for a single-payer Medicare for all system. It absolutely is. And it drives me crazy because every time I look at the empirical data on this, it just, the answer slaps you across the face. Slaps you across the face. It's like, hey, Commonwealth Fund releases a study, every few years. We're 11th out of 11 every time. Every time. Forget that old World Health Organization story or study where we were 37th, because that was from like the year 2000. It's really old. So you could say that's outdated. Don't use it anymore. I agree. But the Commonwealth Fund study, they do it every few years. And they studied 11 healthcare systems. And they're like, you're the worst in the developed world. Canada has, a system where it's public funding of private institutions. France has a similar thing going on. NHS, depending on which study you look at, I should be clear. According to some studies, it's not the NHS that's number one, but according to others, it is the NHS that's number one. And NHS is the most socialized / nationalized system you could have. It's public funding of public institutions. So in other words, even the doctors, they don't have private practices. They're paid by the government. They're on the government payroll. So everything is government when it comes to healthcare. And I have to say, of all the things that I'm quote unquote radicalized on, even though I don't think this is radical at all, it's healthcare. I think everything involved with health should be nationalized. I think you should have the health insurance system, of course, nationalized healthcare. I lean in favor of nationalization for that as well. Big Pharma. I mean, the way that Big Pharma works here is disgusting, to say the least. You have a lot of like universities with government money. They do the research to find these cures and these medicines. And then the health insurance companies, Big Pharma rushes in, buys up the right to the stuff that was just discovered with tax money, and then they price gouge you and mark it up massively and then charge you again. So you paid for the research through taxes, and then you have to pay for the drug when you need it. Nationalize it, man. Nationalize it, for sure. The idea that you need the private market and you need innovation to get this stuff developed, that's not true at all. Oftentimes, the breakthroughs when it comes to science and medicine, it's government funded. Like NASA, for example, we have NASA. We got to, the moon. That was the government doing it. You didn't necessarily need competition in order to get it done. You can make the argument that I guess we were kind of in competition with the Soviet Union and we wanted to beat them. So there's some aspect of competition. But in terms of the funding mechanisms, that was all government. So of course you can develop new medicine with public money and through the government. Have the government hire the best people in the world and get them to work on it. That's it. The idea that that incentive is necessary, that's a myth. It's a myth, especially when it comes to health. This is the last thing you want in the private marketplace. And I'm not as far left as a lot of you guys who watch this show. I wouldn't say that everything, should be nationalized. I don't agree with that. But this is one of those areas where you definitely should nationalize it. So anyway, cut people these stimulus checks. We need more stimulus checks. We need universal basic income. Let's do Medicare for all. I mean, again, it's pretty interesting when every time you read a poll, it sort of verifies what our basic worldview is.